Those figures actually about 20 seconds away. Victoria Fritz is here, and what are we expecting?
Well, these are figures for the last 3 months of last year. There are two very important numbers we're expecting. We're expecting claimant count, and we're expecting the overall level of unemployed, and we're expecting both of those to fall. And we're also, what I would really be looking out for is wage growth and key indicators when it comes to the economic recovery. We can probably, I think, just about, it's probably 9:30, speak to the ONS and Nick Palmer. So, Nick, can you bring us the figures, please? How many people are unemployed?
Hello, good morning. Well, the overall message is that unemployment has continued to fall, another relatively large decrease on the quarter, and another big rise in the number of people in work. So the figures for the latest quarter show that the total number of people unemployed that decreased by 125,000 compared with the previous quarter. That's down to 2.34 million. Now the unemployment rate, that decreased by 0.4 on the quarter. That's down to 7.2%. Now 7.2%, you say that's slightly higher than the figure we had last month. Well, the reason for that is the monthly changes are not directly comparable. The survey from which we derive these figures, the labour force survey, that's a quarterly survey designed to measure quarterly changes. So you can't really compare figures from one month to the next. I think the main conclusion to draw is that unemployment continued to fall significantly on a downward trend, but the suggestion is that the latest figures imply that the rate at which unemployment is falling has perhaps slowed down a little bit.
Right, and what about the number of people actually in work?
The number of people in work, that increased by 193,000 on the latest quarter to just over 30.1 million. That's up nearly 400,000 over the year. There's a big rise in the number of people in full-time work. In fact, all of that latest quarterly increase is full-time employment. But also among those figures, there's a big rise in the number of people who are self-employed. The largest proportion of the increase is actually amongst self-employed people, and that's up to a record high of 4.4 million this quarter.
4.4 million. OK, so we're seeing a lot more people self-employed. What about the number of people over 65s? Because we've seen a big trend there, haven't we?
Yes, generally there's a strong growth in employment in all age groups, but particularly for people aged 50 and over and people aged 65 and over too. But also there's an increase for young people as well. A big rise for people aged 16 to 24 in work, and that's coupled with a big drop in youth unemployment this quarter. That's down 48,000 on the quarter, just over 900,000. So youth unemployment is actually the lowest it's been for 2.5 years.
So big drop in youth unemployment, down to its lowest level for 2.5 years. That would be welcome news, but there is often a debate about the level of skills and the skills requirements that young people are facing, and that perhaps many of them have missed the boat when it comes to jobs because they've been out of the labour market for so long. What have we been seeing for the length of time that people have been unemployed?
Well, generally, unemployment is falling for all kinds of durations, so we're seeing another large fall in the long-term unemployed. That's down by about 40,000 on the quarter to around 800,000, but also a big drop in shorter-term unemployed. And the same goes for the claimant count as well. The drop in long-term claimants is down, the number of shorter-term claimants is down. In fact, if you look at the claimant count total claimant count, the number of claimants of job seekers allowance in January this year, that's down by over 27,000 on the month to 1.22 million. Total claimants of job seekers allowance is actually down by nearly 1/3 compared with the same time a year ago. So it's coming down right across the board really for all kinds of people, all age groups and all kinds of durations.
Now, what really matters, I believe, is wage growth. What can you tell me about what's happening to pay?
Well, the latest figures of average weekly earnings, they're for the 3 months ending December. Total pay, including bonuses, that rose by 1.1% compared with the same period a year ago. Now that's slightly up on the 0.9% we published last month. So wage growth is just slightly up, and the gap between wage growth and the consumer price inflation, so it's narrowed very slightly, but it's still a significant gap. And that gap has been there pretty much for the last 5 years or so.
Right, and what can you break that down for me between private sector and public sector pay, please?
The breakdown between public and private sector, most of what increases are there are in the private sector. Public sector pay has hardly changed over the year, so it's predominantly within the private sector, but within the private sector it's spread across most industrial sectors.
Right. Nick Palmer, thank you very much for your time. So, in summary...
I bet Nick would be great on a pub quiz, because do you know, is it all in there? You know absolutely every question. Fantastic with figures, Nick. Thanks for coming in once again. We are always seen as being miserable and we always bring bad news. I'm just going through every single one of those figures. They're all good.
Yes, they are. I mean, we have seen youth unemployment come down. That's been a main issue. We've seen the number of people in work increase. We've seen the number of people over 65 increase. But when we look now at the unemployment rate, it has been steadily falling, and we have seen it drop down. He said it's ticked up just a little bit to 7.2%. Now, that is actually come in above expectations. People were expecting perhaps we might even see another fall. And one of the major reasons we've been expecting perhaps something like that is we've seen recent falls in the past, and we've seen that the Bank of England, when they were looking at what might happen with interest rates, they said we're not going to even touch them until they reach 7%, and they thought back in August that that we might reach that 7% threshold in 3 years' time. We're actually almost there now, so it's no wonder really that the Bank of England has changed its guidance when it comes to interest rates.
Just explain, because the figure has come down and yet that figure of 7.2% is up, but we're looking at quarterly figures, aren't we, rather than monthly figures? And Nick was trying to explain that. Exactly,
yes. So we're looking at a rolling average, so we're looking at a 3-month picture, and that gives a better overall picture of the workforce. But he's right, there's no getting around it. The economic recovery is certainly in train. When we heard yesterday that inflation has come down somewhat, we've heard today that wage growth has increased. So that differential between how much the prices are rising in the shops and how much we're all earning, that's coming down slightly. So the cost of living crisis is perhaps easing somewhat, although it won't be until perhaps later on in the year that we might actually see wages increase faster than prices in the shops.
Victoria, thank you very much.